Hi, I'm Adroit Cormier, the Executive Director of Mount Blue TV. I'm pleased to introduce our guest today, Scott Barber. Welcome, Scott.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So, Scott, tell us a little bit about yourself. Where are you from originally, and where did you go to school?
Grew up in Wilton. Been living in Perkins Township for slightly less than a year at this point, so that's a different move. But I'm going through. Went to Cushing School, Academy Hill, and then the whole way through. Graduated Mount Blue High School, and I'll be attending University of Southern Maine.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about that experience for growing up as a musician. Obviously there's the music program through the high school. Was music something that was also in your family in terms of family members?
Not at all in the family, but like many, I grew up with a guitar hero in the home. Nice. And by luck, sheer luck, my brother had asked for a guitar for Christmas many years and then decided to abandon the project. So I sort of picked it up in his place.
Luckily, your brother didn't decide guitar was for him.
Yeah.
How many years did it stay abandoned? Was it quite a quick transition into your possession, or?
3 years or so. I think it was off and on. He was never truly interested in it, but it was just something he had around. Played Smoke on the Water probably a few times.
Nice.
As you do.
Yeah, as one does. When he was messing around with that and you had Guitar Hero, was guitar the thing that you were drawn to initially as an instrument?
Yes. We also had a ukulele, but I had no idea what I was doing. I would just sort of, that sounds good, right?
They call that just like uking around, or?
I never even looked up chords. It was all chromatic nonsense, and
yeah.
So
with the guitar though, watching you perform, it seemed obvious that was an instrument that you're strongly drawn to and have a lot of. You mentioned things like different scales, and was it the Lydian scale?
Lydian scale.
Yeah. So. Pretty versed not only in just technique, but other knowledge with music. And so tell me a little bit about that, your journey with the guitar.
Well, one thing that should be said, foremost, I consider myself a composer, which it's a little bit pretentious to say because that has a bit of connotation to it. Being a composer doesn't necessarily make you special, but I like to absorb theory, and I like to write things on the computer, but I do, play guitar as the instrument, because you got to play some sort of instrument. So that was what I decided to go with. But and I did take some lessons for a while, and I'm really thankful for those teachers, because even if I might have not been the best student, but they still worked their magic to some degree. So I'm thankful for them.
Other than, so you had, it's really important, right, to have mentors and people along the way that help. What about in terms of listening to music? Were there particular musicians that you were drawn to, or different types of music that you would hear and say, I want to do that? Or?
Well, originally I was drawn to complexity and sort of virtuosity, showmanship. So I remember being a big fan of Joe Satriani for a while. I don't know if I've listened to him recently, though, but I remember there was a phase where I thought Surfing with the Alien was the greatest thing ever recorded.
Nice.
And then I sort of faded out. I got into grunge for a while.
Yeah.
And now, and then I've sort of discovered sort of the eclectic bands. There's a whole list. I could list them off, but those in the know.
Right.
Or I'm sorry, should I?
No, that's true. And well, I think that's interesting too. And for me, when I had like greatest hit CDs going through like high school and things, and like the first time I really like listened to an album was like Blood on the Tracks with a buddy of mine with Bob Dylan, and I was like, oh man, this is like the other songs that are on the album, and then really started getting into music more from there. For you, it's an interesting path into what you hear first, but then where that goes.
It's actually sort of been a transition into that and out of that at the same time, because it used to be I would just listen to individual tracks here and there. Then I got really into the album experience. That's the only way to go, man. You know, if you're not listening to the full album, you might as well not listen at all. No one gets it nowadays. And then I sort of transitioned out of that, because nowadays I don't have time to listen to. It's not even that my life has gotten more busy. Just, you know, if I listen to more than 20 minutes of jazz at a time, then, oh, that's too much jazz. Okay, now I gotta listen to Stravinsky now. Okay, that's too much. Now I gotta listen to Romanian fiddle folk songs or whatever. So I have to constantly keep a balance with, you know, the things I listen to make sure one isn't influencing me more than the others. And I gotta check out the top 40 auto-tuned pop hits also, so see what the kids are listening to.
Yeah, that's sort of what I noticed too, watching you perform and listening to your music. You know, you talked about jazz, you talked about lots of different types of music. How, with that performance and just in general, did you make choices like cans or kazoos for making music?
Well, the kazoo has been a bit of a trademark gimmick for a while now. I think I got an electric kazoo. I don't know where that is these days, but I gotta find it, dig it out of the trash someday. But I just like the idea of kazoo, because it's something you can take seriously, but a lot of people don't, and I think that there's some potential there.
Yeah.
But it also has a brassy sound. You can use it as a brass instrument if you really have the spirit in you. So. What was the other? The cans.
Yeah, using something like cans, yeah.
I did mention it during the performance. Steve Reich, he wrote a piece called Clapping Music, and it's essentially and you have two people, one group is doing that, and then the other group, they every once in a while they move forward a little bit, so it's offset, and then it's mathematics. Eventually they're gonna, move back in sync. So that was sort of inspired by that. I wrote my own original rhythm, but it's heavily inspired by the work of Steve Reich in that. It's called phasing, I think.
Part of what's interesting about your music and just what I find interesting about you as well is sort of that blend of all these different things, like the mathematics into the music as well. There's a lot of things to be interested in the world, and sometimes I think meet musicians and they are just like hyper focused on that one thing that got them passionate, and that's like their thing. And so it's interesting to see someone also be like sort of just trying to take in all kinds of things and then work your magic into synthesizing your own thing out of that.
And I try to blend sincerity with what would be a good word? Levity? I don't know. Sort of ridiculousness with the sincerity. I think you can't have one without the other, because if you're being too trying too hard to be too sincere, but you're not afraid, or if you're afraid to laugh a little, then you're not really being sincere. But if it's all just fun games all the time, and don't need to worry about it sounding any good, then you're just ending up with a bit of a mess there. So.
Truth.
I think it's good to have blends. It keeps people interesting, or it keeps the sound interesting. Yeah. When you focus on, this is not just music. This is not just a performance. It's not just about my experience as the artist expressing. It's not just this romantic dream of Tchaikovsky writing. Oh yes, I'm expressing my inner deepest thoughts about the world, but it's also about what can you do for the audience? Can you entertain the audience? I think that's part of it as well.
What was the Gazebo performance like for you, being on stage there? Like, what was it like for your experience?
Well, it was the first time anything any of my work has been presented on that kind of scale, I guess. Probably the only comparable thing is in maybe third grade, fourth grade. Early, I had written a sort of a very simple piece called the Daegu song or something like that. We had performed in orchestra. Mr. Stephen Muse was nice enough to oblige me, and I was able to perform it. I didn't know anything at all then when I wrote it, so it's complete nonsense. But still, it was a good experience, I guess. But other than that, this is the first time anything I've created has been really presented. So it was a bit stressful, because it was like, this is the first time. I gotta. I think as the audience realized there was more to this than they saw the cans, they saw the kazoos. So it sort of, I think the laughter sort of opened things up, and it kind of keeps you can't be too stressed if there's people entertained by what you're doing.
Working with what you do, when I first saw it at the like poster for it that you were going to be performing, saw there's like a kazoo going to be involved. I was like, well, how's he going to pull this off? He's going to play kazoo and guitar all at the same time, or so. Talk to me a little bit about that. So you're composing, and part of the composing is that you're playing some of it, but you also have someone else that's performing with you. So talk to me a little bit about working with Rachel and that experience.
Well, I was very glad to work with Rachel. We had worked on a few performances in high school for sort of Student of the Month awards, or I don't know what they're called because they're not really every month. But and a lot of the lyrics were written specifically for that performance. I can say that Winter in Wilton, Ronald Elephant. I think there might have been one or two more. Those I specifically wrote for the performance. They were just a melody before that. So I had to try to think of certain ways of, because I do have recordings of these songs, sort of done with like sampling, and it's a very complicated process. But I'll say I've samples of people playing clarinets, and I'll use GarageBand to sort of play those samples. So part of it became the question of how do you work with a certain medium. In this case, the medium was acoustic guitar and vocals, whereas a lot of the compositions were written in mind with multiple instruments, multiple timbres. So how do you transform those things?
If you have something like GarageBand and you're putting that together, then you sort of can grab a clarinet here or those different things. But then to say, okay, for this specific performance, these are the tools you have. You have two performers and these instruments. And so that's a little bit different of a process than just composing in something like GarageBand.
Yeah. And we did realize during sound check that we kind of realized how much variability there was, because first we start off with the Leonardo da Vinci song, which is just I'm on guitar, she's on vocals. It's very simple mixing wise, and then he sort of asked, "Oh, is there anything else?" And I realized, "Oh, actually, Rachel's gonna be playing guitar." And he goes, "Oh, we also gotta make sure the kazoo's gonna be balanced. Oh, we also gotta make sure the cans." And he looked at me and said, "This is the first time in all my years that I've mixed cans, or I've had to do sound mixing with cans." So I sort of realized as we were right as we were up there, like, oh, there's a lot of different, even with just two people who specialize in two different instruments, there's still a little bit of room to sort of move around and see what extra sounds can we add in here.
You're going to USM, you were telling me? What's your plans there?
Well, undeclared major so far. I guess I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
I'm gonna figure it out as soon as possible, hopefully. We'll see.
Where do you find music continuing in your life?
Right now, I've been working on a private project, I guess. I mean, it's not really. It's just it's not something I'm gonna release or anything.
Right.
It's just for myself, where I'm just trying to create 8-bit versions of some of my things I've written. Just because I get caught up with, we're talking about textures and timbres and all these different instruments. It's nice to think of the 8-bit as its own instrument. Some people write for solo piano. I write for solo 8-bit. It's the computer's playing. It's all its own instrument. You don't have to worry about orchestration or all these whatever. It's sort of a relief to the mind. So that's sort of something I'm continuing on. It'd be interesting to sort of try some musical things at USM. We'll see how that works out. I'll stay a bit vague about that for now because I don't know. I don't know in exactly my plans.
I think it's important to sometimes hear a lot of people in your situation moving into college. There's a real feeling that, geez, I've got to have this all figured out already. And more times than not, people go to a school and what they thought they were going to do, it turns into this whole completely different thing. So that's part of what's nice about college is there's a lot there offered, and I'm sure you have no doubts you're going to find a good path for yourself. I think a lot of people, when they think about, oh, well, that person's a musician, that they were born musicians, and that like some people are born and they're good at math, and some people are born and they're good at this. Some people are artists and some people art. What would you say to that in your experience in terms of being a musician and creating music?
Well, I worked at it, and it's nice to have something to be able to make something materialize, And a lot of people do that in different ways. Some people get into sports, and some people become painters or drawers. I know many people are very talented artists, and it's nice when you just know that at the end of the day, you come back from your 9-to-5 job, you have something to do, and I think anyone can develop any sort of art if they want to. So there might be some certain innate things, but that's really why I worry about that.
You make a really valid point, I think. And I was, like there's a Kurt Vonnegut quote basically about just create things. That like that's the point of doing it, whatever it is. Sing badly in the shower, but like create. You just get yourself involved in art, and that's sort of what I hear you saying is that like just the process is a big part of it, and not necessarily being focused on end product. Do you feel like that's been the case for you?
Well, I tried to have a balance of both.
Yeah.
Try to have something that I can look back on and be proud of, but I also some of those things can be the most frustrating to make, and sometimes not. It can be a whole bit of mix. I think there's just when you hone in on one specific area, it can get almost in any case it just doesn't seem to work out. So you should always have in mind this is what I want to do for myself. This is maybe the considerations of some sort of audience.
The process is your process and the experience you're having, but you're also saying, again, blending those things, that it's also about how's the audience going to experience this.
Yeah. When you're putting on some sort of show, maybe not if you're playing it yourself in your bedroom and this is I can't play these chords here because what will the masses think? I just think of it as some sort of if you're putting on some sort of performance, maybe consider the audience in certain ways.
Yeah.
Yeah. But also maybe not. Maybe you want to do something really groundbreaking and you want the audience to be shocked and horrified. I guess that's also okay as well. Anything's okay. Yeah. As long as no one gets seriously hurt.
I just saw a video a friend sent to me. I think it's like from 2009. It's like Neil Young on stage and with Paul McCartney, and he just ends up like shredding the whole guitar. Like all of the strings are broken, and Neil Young's still like taking the strings and just like beating the guitar with the strings. Like
there's a famous. Do you know about Fluxus?
I don't know about the Fluxus.
Yeah.
What's Fluxus?
It was is an art movement. So they were trying to create something like neo-dada, and they had a performance. I think they traveled to Germany and they just destroyed a piano on stage. And you see a lot of this, I think there's footage of it, you see people in the audience and they're trying to figure out what to think, you know, if they're supposed to be horrified and outraged, if they're supposed to be, maybe they're like, I don't get this at all, but I don't want to be, you know, I don't want to seem square in front of my friends here, so I have to pretend this is something very profound. So I think there's, you know, there's many different ways to create many different reactions, and there's just so many different things to do, you know.
Yeah, agreed.
Why not? Just expand your palette. I think find a palette. I think the things I was creating 4 or 5 years ago were sort of mundane because I didn't have very much of a palette, and I was very involved with. I think I mentioned earlier grunge. Not that I look back on some of those like grunge stuff fondly, but I think that should be incorporated, not necessarily become the supreme rule. You should try to find as many things. I think world music is very unappreciated. I think you should try to find as many things as possible to draw on. And maybe you draw on some more than others, but there should always be different considerations in your mind.
Absolutely. That's great advice. Scott, I'd like to thank you for coming in. Thank you for the performance at the Gazebo, and taking some time to talk to us today. Really enjoyed it.
Thank you for inviting me on here.